one of the biggest, I don't understand how our justice system got to where it is this quickly. I hope it's different in New York and Washington, D.C., but I have a feeling it's this way in many states, and we're not even connected to the rule of law anymore. I read an article, an op-ed from Alan Dershowitz, who was at the courtroom the last when the defense rested and heard the testimony of who was it, Cohen, Stu, or Collins? I can't remember. And all he did was raise his eyebrows when there was an objection, and the judge said, sustained. He looked at the judge and raised his eyebrows, which set the judge into a tirade, cleared the courtroom. For some reason, Alan Dershowitz was allowed to stay, and he writes about it at dersh.substack.com, and you have to read it. And Alan joins us now. Hi, Alan. How are you?
Hi. I wish the trial had been televised so that all Americans could see the veins in this judge's head popping. I mean, he just went berserk. You know where he reminded me of the psycho in the movie Taxi Driver? You looking at me? Hey, you looking at me? The judge had such a thick, thin skin. You looking at me? You raising your eyebrows? I'm going to strike all your testimony. Can you imagine the effect if the judge had actually gone through with it?
Hang on just a second. Did he say that in front of the jury?
No. He did that outside the jury. In fact, he didn't say it in front of the media. He threw the media out. For some bizarre reason, I was sitting in the front row, and they didn't ask me to leave. So I was sitting literally right near the judge and the defendants and Cohen and all of them. He took the jury out, but he said basically, if you raise your eyebrows again, I will deny Donald Trump a fair trial by striking your defense testimony and not allowing him to put on a defense. Now, Donald Trump didn't raise his eyebrows, at least in the courtroom. He certainly raised a lot of eyebrows outside the courtroom, as he has the right to do, because this is a political trial, so he's responding in a political way. But the idea that you would strike the defense because of something you didn't like a witness doing, first of all, everybody has a constitutional right to raise their eyebrows and to look and stare at a judge. I've done that many, many times. Never forget Mae West in the movie Little Chickadee. She's in front of the judge, and the judge says, "You're showing your contempt for the court." And Mae West says, "No, Your Honor, I'm trying my best to hide my contempt for the court." And, that's what many people do to this judge. I'm not a witness or anything, so I didn't hide my contempt. I rolled my eyes. I raised my eyebrows. I stared at the judge. I whispered to people next to me saying, would you believe the judge did that? Kept out this testimony, let in this testimony. Let's remember, this is a judge who was so permissive with the prosecution. He allowed Stormy Daniels to testify that they had sex in a missionary position, that he used a certain kind of deodorant, and that he wore silk pajamas. Now, how is that relevant to an entry case involving bookkeeping entry? Utterly irrelevant, utterly prejudicial. The judge said, no, that's okay. Let it all go in. But when Cohen tries to testify about what his former client said to him and the client had waived the privilege, said to him saying, I don't know anything about Trump. I can't incriminate him. The judge said, no, I'm imposing restrictions on what your witness could say. And I would raise my eyebrows.
He wasn't, wait. He wasn't allowed to enter that into testimony?
He was restricted as to what he could say. He was allowed to say that he had said on numerous occasions that he didn't know anything about Trump. But he was restricted from saying many other things. As he has said, he swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the judge said, no, I only want a partial truth. When it came to an expert witness, the judge was even tougher. The judge said that even though the prosecution was allowed to introduce evidence that they claim the payments were illegal campaign contributions, the country's leading expert on campaign contributions, who was prepared to testify these were not illegal campaign contributions, the judge said, no, you can testify as to your credentials and a few other things, but you can't testify as to the legality or the illegality, even though the other side was allowed to. What does it mean under the Sixth Amendment, then, that you have a right to confront? You have a right to confront the charges and the witnesses against you. You think that it means you have a right to call witnesses on your own who would tell a different story and give a different account so the jury can make up their mind, but not according to this judge. This judge has an agenda. He wants a conviction, whether it's because his daughter would profit from a conviction. She works for a fundraising outfit that fundraises off this trial, or whether there are other reasons for it. I don't know. I'm not going to try to psychoanalyze the judge any more than the judge should try to psychoanalyze Donald Trump. In order to convict him, you have to believe that the only reason that the false entries were made, and they weren't even made by him, they were made by some underling, that the only reason the false entries, if they were false even, were made was to affect the campaign, that it had no reason to avoid embarrassment to his wife, to his son who was in school at the time, to avoid losing his television show because there's a morality clause in the contract. No reason to believe it might affect his branding business because, all the branding of the Trump hotels, etc. Obviously, there were mixed motives, but the jury has to conclude that the predominant motive was to impact the election, even though if it was a campaign contribution, he wouldn't have had to report it until after the election. This case is so absurd. In 60 years of practicing, teaching, and writing about criminal law, I have never seen a weaker case. And yet there might be a conviction because this is a New York jury.
You have watched juries forever.
Yeah.
Did you see any signs from them at all, one way or another?
Hard to tell. When he acknowledged that he had stolen $60,000 from Trump and never tried to repay it, I could see the juries literally raising their own eyebrows. They leaned forward. They paid close attention to that. There was a lot of boring testimony. And, jurors don't close their eyes, but they sit back. You never know what they're thinking. The only problem is that jurors usually love the judge. The judge is the benevolent despot. And he is benevolent when the jury is there. It's when the jury leaves that he becomes the true tyrant that he really is. So the jury may take a cue from the judge, and the judge is going to give an instruction, I believe, that clearly favors the prosecution and is prejudiced against the defendant. So there's no real predicting the outcome. I guess the most betting people are saying a hung jury, that it's going to be hard to get 12 people to conclude either way that he was totally innocent or totally guilty.
I hope. And then what happens from there?
The prosecution has the right to try him again, but at that point the trial would have to take place probably after the election, and I'm not sure they would go forward. It would depend on the vote. If the vote were 10-2 for conviction, they might retry him. If it was 10-2 for acquittal, they might not retry him. So there's a lot to be seen. The other thing that's bizarre, I've never seen this before, the judge delayed the trial a whole week. The jury went home. The jury's home today. It'll be home tomorrow. It'll be home Friday. Of course, then the holiday vacation, then it comes back next week.
Isn't this one of those cases that you really should sequester the jury so they're not seeing the news?
Of course, and especially that they're not seeing CNN or reading the New York Times or watching MSNBC, which have already convicted him without a doubt. I mean, MSNBC thinks this is the strongest case since the Abraham Lincoln assassination, if it had been on videotape. There's no doubt by the MSNBC people because they're rooting for a verdict, as are the media. When I was in the courtroom the other day, you could just see and you could hear from the media, they're all rooting for a conviction. Even one of the courtroom artists criticized me for coming to the trial and showing support for Donald Trump. I didn't come to show political support for Donald Trump. I haven't made up my mind who I'm voting for. I voted for Biden in the last election, but I'm not sure who I'm going to vote for. I didn't come there to show political support. I came there to show legal support, that this is a case that should never have been brought. I would have done the same thing if Biden had been charged with a non-crime like this. I'm not political when it comes to my legal analysis.
Alan, let me switch gears. There's a story out about the FBI and the raid on Mar-a-Lago, and that there was they were allowed to use deadly force. and it's my understanding, at least, that this is being misreported by the right. That's in all of these. It's a general thing.
It is, but there shouldn't have been a search. There shouldn't have been a search warrant at all. There should have been just a subpoena. When you deal with people like the former president of the United States, you send them a subpoena. And if he fails to disclose the material, then he's in contempt of court or in violation of statutes. But you don't burst into his home. Of course you need to be able to use deadly force if there's somebody there who's shooting at you, but that they should never have used the search warrant in the first place.
Yeah, that was kind of. I didn't know about the subpoena and all that you had other options. But as I was looking at this morning, and I'm like, at least for presidents, and I think it would be fine for other things because a lot of people seem to be having their doors kicked in. But when it comes to the president, and I say this about Biden too, I'm sure that was in the same paperwork for Joe Biden, in his garage.
They didn't have a search warrant. They didn't have a search warrant for Biden. They had a subpoena. So there was no such paperwork for Biden. So, it's a very different, very, very different standard. It's rare to get a search warrant. Normally, the way to go is just in a gentlemanly way or in a ladylike way. You say, look, we're subpoenaing this. Please produce it into the court tomorrow. And if you don't, you'll be held in contempt. And if you try to destroy something like it is claimed Hillary Clinton tried to destroy some of her servers, that's an independent crime. But Hillary Clinton didn't have a search warrant conducted against her. Joe Biden didn't. I don't know about Biden's kid. I don't know whether Hunter Biden had a search warrant. But search warrants are not the usual way of obtaining material. Usually it's by subpoena.
So I talked to you maybe 6 months ago, and we were talking about banana republics. And you said we're up to 6 bananas. Get 10 bananas, and we're a banana republic. Where are we today?
Yeah. If there's a conviction, we're up to 7. But there's another court I want to talk about for a second, if you don't mind, and that is the International Criminal Court, that for the first time in its history has gone after leaders of a democracy, namely Benjamin Netanyahu and the military minister in Israel, even though what they did was purely self-defense. And it means that the United States is at risk, Great Britain is at risk, Canada is at risk. Any country that wages war is now at risk. There is a rule for the International Criminal Court that they can't go after any country that has a working judiciary which is capable and willing to investigate their own people. And Israel has a very active judiciary. 4 former prime ministers were investigated. 4 former prime ministers. Rabin, Sharon, Olmert, and Netanyahu, and 1 former president went to jail. In fact, I made a joke about that when I visited Ehud Olmert in prison. I said in Israel, when you ask for a former prime minister's cell number, it's not necessarily his telephone. and what other country can boast that they have had such an aggressive judiciary, and yet the International Criminal Court says, no, we're going after you. Even though Israel and the United States are not even signatories to the treaty, they're not members of the court. So we live in an age now where courts are going out of control. The court in New York is out of control. The court in The Hague is out of control. And we should not be living by the judiciary. In the book of, I think it's the book of Ruth in the Bible, it starts by saying, when judges ruled the land, there was famine and hunger.
Yes.
You don't want judges to rule the land.
Right. Alan, thank you so much for talking to us. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure to have intelligent talk with you. I always look forward to it. Thank you.
Alan Dershowitz, Harvard Law School professor emeritus and host of The Dersh Show. And he's also the author of Get Trump. If you haven't read that, it's well worth your time.